you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today we're going to talk about cognitive health. We are our cognition for the most part. Brains trapped inside of a skeleton prison that is inside of a meat sack. And so it's important that we not only take care of our meat sacks, which is what we tend to focus on a lot here, but also take care of our spiritual and emotional and mental wellness, which are also very important components that are riding around with us in this meat sack. So one major component of that is definitely our cognition, our memory. Our memories really shape who we are, or the way that I look at it, who we have been. It's the building blocks to get to where we are today at any point. It's part of our personal narrative, those stories that we tell ourselves about what we've done with our lives and in our lives, and what each of those things really mean to us. The people we feel close to and who have been good and bad in our lives. Those memories help us form different types of opinions about how to love and how to trust in the future as well. So a lot of our emotional and spiritual wellness, I think, is very much interconnected with memory. That also means that if you start losing your memory, whether that is due to anything from a traumatic brain injury or to age, that can really feel like a large loss of self, because it is, in a way. It can also really mess up the practical side of your life, like how you have to get around the neighborhood now, or figuring out how to get a hold of a loved one, or making sure that you do so on schedule if, say, you have a check-in with your kids or something. So when it comes to memory, I think it's really important to try to address it head on. Some folks tend to lose their memory as they age, while others don't. Why is that? Part of it is genes. Those certainly play a role here in the predisposition to different types of issues, just like anything else. But so do the choices that we make each day. So some ways to help protect your memory include making sure you're following a healthy diet. And remember, diet just means what you're eating, where you're getting your nutrients and stuff from. It does not mean that you need to go on a formal diet, like a fad diet, like Atkins or keto or anything like that. Just making sure that you're getting all of those vitamins and minerals that we've discussed in the past, and all that water. So if you haven't drank all of your water yet today, go ahead and chug some of that right now, you guys. We have to stay hydrated. It's important for our bodies. Our tissues need it, including the ones that we can't see, like the linings of organs and such. So a lot of your body is water. Replenish it. Some other things that you can do to protect your memory include exercising regularly. It's really good for you. It helps with the blood flow to your body and your blood carrying oxygen to different parts of your body as well. Not smoking is also quite helpful in that aspect. So Maybe don't smoke, or if you do smoke, try to reduce how many cigarettes you're smoking. Also, keeping your blood pressure under control, keeping an eye on those unhealthy cholesterols, those LDLs in particular, as well as your blood sugar. All of these things are going to help you with keeping a healthy body, but also a healthy brain. In addition to these types of steps, you also want to make sure you're living a mentally active lifestyle. Your muscles grow stronger with use, and they atrophy if you don't use them. Your mental exercise is no different. Your mind, your brain really need you to be exercising them. Try different types of tasks. Try something you've never done before. Do some of those memory puzzles. Mental exercises helps keep your mental skills and your memory in solid order. There are certain types of brain work that can be more effective than others, but any type of brain exercises is better than just being a mental couch potato. So you want to make sure that you are enjoying some stimulating information in addition to binging all of Tiger King right now. It's okay to love Tiger King, you guys. I haven't personally seen it yet. Haven't had time, but all of my friends say that it is a wild ride. But in addition to that, we also need to exercise our brains a little bit. Let's talk about the sociocultural implications of Tiger King or something. Let's dive into another conversation. It can be about Tiger King as long as we are also exercising our brains at the same time or separately at another time, but still doing it. The activities that are going to be the most impactful for your mind, though, are the ones that are going to require you to work beyond what's easy or what is really within your comfort zone. If you are just playing a ton of solitaire repeatedly and watching documentaries on Netflix, that might not be sufficient to get you the results that you need. You want to do things that really challenge your brain, like learning a new language or volunteering somewhere. You can do a lot of volunteering online. And any other activities that strain your brain, like solid debates with your friends as well. All of these things can be a lot better for you than just sitting back and playing solitaire. Sure, it can be challenging sometimes when you're playing solitaire, especially if you're doing the 3-card draw rather than the 1. But I think we would all agree that learning a new language is a lot more difficult than playing solitaire or watching documentaries on the internet. I've been teaching English to some children online overseas recently as a second language, and these kids are so smart, you guys. It is definitely a challenge for them to learn these things, but they practice it. We do our lessons for 25 minutes one-on-one, and that is it. And they're still picking it up all the time. I have a couple of them a couple of times a week, and whenever we do this, it's just like 2 lessons a week, and then we do the next lesson the following week, and they're so good at it. But it's because they're practicing it. You have to make sure that you're not afraid to sound silly if you pick the wrong word or if it comes out with a funny accent. That's something I am working on myself, but it's important to get through those senses of shame or humiliation in order to really exercise your brain. It's really good for you, and also, if it makes you feel better, this is actually a marketable skill. You're probably not going to be able to market any skills with the information you pick up on Discovery Channel documentaries or with just playing endless rounds of solitaire. If you do, please let me know because that sounds amazing and I would live for it. But in the meantime, learning a new language can be really helpful for you. So can volunteering. And when I say volunteering, that can be anything from just volunteering with like a soup kitchen or working with donations and stuff, or you could work with a nonprofit. A lot of them are volunteer-based, and they need everything from folks manning the phones to people to help them with the finance and budgeting component or grant writing or organizational management and leadership. There are a whole host of things that they could really use folks' help with. If envelope stuffing is what you're comfortable with, go for it. You just find something that you enjoy and start there. And then maybe explore that nonprofit structure and see if there is a challenging way that you can also help. Maybe something that scares you a little bit, or you feel like you might not be enough for it yet. You have a little bit of that imposter syndrome going on about it. Be open with them about it and tell them that you want to try or you want to shadow them. And that is a really good way to pick up those skills firsthand. So do those internships or just volunteer, you guys. And it's okay if you're not productive in this regard right now, but just something that's challenging, even if it's not a resume line item. All right, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how meditation can help you with cognition.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Before the break, we were talking about cognitive health and a couple of ways to preserve that as we age. Now we're going to talk about how meditation can really help us out in that regard. A 2019 study in the journal Brain Sciences found that folks who meditated ended up making fewer mental mistakes. So they studied a group of 200 people who had never meditated, and then they led them through a 20-minute guided meditation. And the type they used was called open monitoring. So while a lot of types of meditation have you focus on a single thing, like your breathing or a visual image, open monitoring instead is to pay more attention to your feelings and the sensations of your body. So after they meditated, the participants took some computerized tests, and they had to complete tasks within them while they were being exposed to distractions that were kind of bombarded at them regularly. And their brain activity was measured by an EEG during both meditation and test taking. The results were that when the meditators made a mistake on the test and recognized it, the EEG output showed that there was an increase in specific neural signals that are called conscious error recognition. And that's really just all about how the brain is able to identify mistakes. So the study did not find that meditation reduced the number of mistakes people made, but it did make them more aware of their errors. And it's a really important step to making fewer errors to first recognize that you are making them to begin with. I used to use and a lot in my speech when I was younger, and then I decided to go ahead and cut it out of my speech. So I just started listening to how I was speaking as I was speaking and becoming aware of when I said or And then as I was becoming aware of it, I went through and tried to eliminate it whenever I could. Sometimes I would end up pausing for quite a bit, and other times it just went through really seamlessly. It was a big move for me, and it really helped me out a lot. But again, it was a long time before I completely eliminated that from my vocabulary. And I say completely, but it probably slips in like 1 to 2% of the time. But it's a very low rate at this point, and it's helped me a ton in business as well as in public speaking in general. I highly recommend it. And it's just very similar to this error reduction method. So we recognize the errors that we're making first, and then we go through and start eliminating them. And it's okay. A lot of it's going to be halted speech at first, but it's similar in principle to learning a new language. You're just enhancing your own, and that can be really helpful. You might sound a little bit crazy at first, but it's fine. It'll be fine, you guys. All right. Now we're going to talk about how we can boost our memory by working out regularly. So I think we all know, or at least a lot of us at this point in the podcast, that exercising regularly can help you maintain your brain function. It's not just for your body, it's also for your brain. Some new research has shown that brain activity tends to increase and your memory improves immediately after a single short period of exercise. So that is the good news. That's also why one of my professors in college, Mr. Morgan, shout out to him again, told me that whenever I'm feeling tired at like that 2 p.m. slump, instead of going and taking a nap or laying down, what I should do is go ahead and work out. Go for a quick jog, lift some weights, just whatever you especially need to be doing for you to get that heart rate up and to go ahead and feel some of those effects on your brain. It helps to wake you up a bit, and it's really important for you. So even if it's just something simple like jumping jacks, go ahead and do those. You can do those by your car in the parking lot or in an empty office hallway or conference room. Just make sure that if you're doing it in the parking lot that you are out of reach of any vehicles that may be speeding through there. So with this type of process, the more exertion you put into your exercise, the more you're going to see improvements. So whatever level of exertion you're able to achieve on that single exercise is predictive of how much of a brain boost you're going to get if you continue to exercise at that same intensity over a longer term. So they presented those findings at the Cognitive Neuroscience Society's annual meeting in 2019, and the researchers had recruited 34 people whose average age was 67 and gave each of them an MRI scan, specifically a functional MRI scan, and that shows you brain activity. And they also gave them a memory test in which they had to remember people's faces. Then the participants were asked to exercise for 20 minutes on a stationary bike that could measure their physical effort. Then they did the fMRI scans and the memory test again. Those participants were split up into 2 groups based on their exertion level. They did moderate intensity for some and lower intensity for others. And both groups had a stationary bike program. So 50 minutes of exercise 3 times per week for 3 months. So they were following all the same rules except for the intensity was different in one group versus the other. Then the fMRI scans and memory tests were repeated at the end of the 3 months, and people in both groups improved their overall aerobic fitness. The researchers also found that folks who continued to perform at the moderate intensity level had higher brain test scores at the end, especially when compared to the folks who stayed at the lower intensity for that 3 months. So they think that there's a possible link between how much you exert yourself when you work out and the cognitive boost you get during any single bout of exercise, as well as how that could predict some persistent long-term brain improvements later on. But even if you start at a low intensity, it is totally okay. You can work your way up over time, and it's recommended to start lower first so that you don't hurt yourself. You are less likely to hurt yourself that way. But go ahead and start it, see how it goes, and then increase your physical effort over time. Then once you get to a point where you're really happy with the intensity, it's moderate or so, then attain that and you will really see some consistent positive brain effects. And that part is really exciting. So I know that a lot of folks are concerned about their memory as they age, but we can take steps to help prevent losing our memory as we age. And a lot of that comes down to physical exercise or to meditating or making sure that we are eating the right foods. So we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about lifelong learning.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing ways to help your brain have a great memory, and that includes regular exercise and meditating. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about healthy brain aging. No pain, no gain, you guys, right? So that also applies to our minds, not just to our muscles. We need to get out of our comfort zones in order to really be exercising our brains. Sure, sitting there playing solitaire for hours can be mindless fun, but it is kind of mindless. You want to make sure that we are doing things we haven't done before and we're truly challenging ourselves. Does it feel kind of difficult? Then it's probably a challenge. Do you kind of feel like you maybe don't want to do it? Or do you get really excited because it's a challenge? Either way, whether you're like an not another challenge or a yes, another challenge person, you want to make sure that you are challenging yourself and making sure that your body is getting the most benefits that it can really get, including those from aging. So with I caught it though. So with your brain, have you guys thought about healthy brain aging in general? We tend to focus mostly on unhealthy brain aging. We talk about Alzheimer's and dementia and stuff like that, and how to treat those loved ones and what are the best approaches for having conversations with them when it's the sixth one that day of the same type and everything. But we don't really tend to talk about keeping our brains well, in my opinion. It's a lot like healthcare. It should really be called sick care generally, because that's what we mostly talk about in that capacity. So, with this brain exercise, you want to make sure you live a mentally active life. It's not just sitting down to do the Sunday crossword. That's great too, and that's a wonderful first step. But just like we can start with low intensity for our physical exercise and then work our way up, we can do the same thing with our mental exercise. So if you're already doing that Sunday crossword, that's fantastic. There are other crosswords that you can find online as well, and you can do those for free. A lot of them you can print out. I like to print out crosswords every day and do those. I've not done any of those in a while, but you can find a lot of really cool free ones online, including some that are themed, if you'd like to also learn other facts as you go. So that said, what kind of exercise is going to be best for your brain? There are certain kinds of brain work that are more effective than others, which is something that we discussed in our first segment, including making sure it's not just solitaire or watching documentaries. You want it to be an active challenge for your brain. That's what makes it brain exercise. If you are able to just kick back and not really have to think about it and you're just absorbing, then it's not quite brain exercise. So the best type that you can get is going to be being a lifelong learner. So the first 12 years in school, 5 years being a small child. So I don't know, the first 18 years of your life, for for the most part, even though you're not in school, a lot of people for those first 5, you are spending your time building what brain scientists call your cognitive reserve. So that means pretty much that dense network of connections that you have between your brain cells. You have experience and learning that also aid in building and maintaining that connectivity. So that's part of why learning new things is really important for us. You're using these mental skills that you otherwise wouldn't. And when you are actually learning something, you're forging new neural pathways. That's very important for you. As you get older, you want to keep what you already have and maintain those neural networks in the best working order that you can. So one of the things that I like to do to help strain my brain and be a lifelong learner is taking free classes online. Nobody pays me to say this. I like to take classes online on Coursera and edX in particular. I've also taken some from Code Academy and Khan Academy, and they're very interesting. I also highly recommend going online to YouTube and Googling 5 levels of explanation. And it is where someone who is an expert in their field, like one of my favorites is the field of quantum computing for those videos. And they explain it to you, starting with explaining it to a child in person, like a 7-year-old. And then they explain it to someone who's about 14. And then they explain it to like a college freshman and then a graduate student. And then they discuss it at the level with another colleague, more or less. So at that point, you're getting a really good look into what this really is. So by explaining it in these levels, they're helping you to build upon that knowledge and vocabulary from before. And that's also largely how we end up learning a lot of things in school. I highly recommend it. It's super interesting. I didn't know how quantum computing worked before that, and I'm still not entirely sure that I do. That one was a little beyond my experience level, but I very much still enjoyed it. And more important, it was very challenging for my brain to try to suss out. I'm going to watch it again and go ahead and see if that sticks better this time. Granted, there's so many things rumbling around up there in my mind that it's a lot. I do take a lot of free classes. Right now, I'm taking Finance Essentials, just because I never took something like that in college, and I figured, why not? I'm also taking a class on R and bioinformatics, as well as another, this one's really just a webinar on grant writing for nonprofits. So these are just things I thought I might want to learn. And if I don't like them, then that's okay. I'll end up not liking them. But I've also taken classes on things like international law and bioinformatics and the dynamics of infectious diseases, epidemiology, and database management for clinical research. So I've learned a lot over the years, and you'd be surprised at the events in life that lead you to the point in which those skills become usable. A lot of the things that I've learned in my life out of boredom have become usable and applicable in other areas of my life later on. And you can take classes online for free from anything like the challenges of global poverty, which I have taken on edX, I believe, and that one was very good. And you can take statistics courses from Stanford. I took an RStudio class from Stanford, or just an R class. We use both. But each of these uses different things. So some of them use Jupyter notebooks to work in. Some use another platform. So you can learn a lot, even if you have already had a similar class as well. And if you feel like you need a little bit more reinforcement before you go on, you can take another class from a different professor that has the same type of material and syllabus so that you can get more comfortable with it. Because I firmly believe that sometimes we feel like we don't like things like math and other subjects, not because we genuinely don't like them or because we aren't good at them, but because of how the information was presented. There are 7 billion people on this planet, and we all think in different ways. Not every single person thinking a different way, but we all have our different learning styles, and there's a handful of learning styles that we each could draw upon. I learn best by watching and by doing, and that's one reason why my lab scores in school were always higher than my actual class scores for things like biology and chemistry and math. It was just easier for me to understand the applicability for that, like in a microbiology lab, than some of the other materials. Chemistry was the one that gave me the hardest time, not gonna lie to you guys, but everything worked out fine. I didn't make lower than a B, don't worry. But, yeah, it was just a lot for me to learn as I went through, and I maxed out all my credits in school. I highly recommend it if it's possible. Some school programs will only charge you up to a certain amount of credit hours. So my school at the time, I believe, only charged up to like 15 credit hours, and any that you took past that were free. It was either 15 or 18. Now that is a big load. That means when I was taking 21 credit hours, I was taking a lot of classes because my minor classes each also had a lab, which were only considered to be 1 credit hour. So there's that. But it was something that was very helpful for me to get through college more quickly and more inexpensively, less expensively, rather. It was very helpful for me, and if you guys don't know about that, now you do. I also recommend looking into taking CLEP tests. I did not know that was a thing at the time, but you can just test out of some classes. I'm not sure if you get the credit for it, but you should definitely check it out at your school so you don't have to take calculus for the 3rd time if you had it early in high school and everything too. All right, we're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some more ways to strain our brains.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We were talking about the importance of being a lifelong learner and a couple of life hacks, like seeing if your school has CLEP tests and if they will let you take classes for free beyond a certain number of credit hours. I recommend checking it out if that is a burden you think that you can bear. If you're more comfortable with a smaller load of classes, or you're just too busy in the rest of your life in order to do that, by all means, do what is going to keep you in good mental health simultaneously. But there are lots of free classes you can take online, and I like to talk about the free ones and these other life hacks that I've found because it's important when keeping in mind socioeconomic status as well. So there are ways to obtain these things for free. You can also learn a language for free online using Duolingo, and it can be really fun to do that with your friends and then practice it in your chats together. And by that, I mean like Messenger, but you can also practice it verbally, and that's really going to be more helpful for you. By being lifelong learners, it really helps our brains form those neural pathways and be really healthy. Also, as we get older, a lot of community colleges will allow older individuals who are like 65 and older. It depends on the specific area you're in, whether they offer it and what the age is. But elderly adults are able to take some of these classes for free. I've mentioned it before in an episode about older adults, And I want to mention it again, just in case y'all missed it. So you can go and learn whatever. Go to a community college and take up blacksmithing. Or if you want to work on your car, you can take auto shop or auto body if you want to learn how to paint cars. You can also go through and take, Spanish. You can take anatomy. As long as the classes aren't full, that's usually the requirement, then you can go and take it for free. And some schools, especially community colleges, will let you audit classes for free too. A lot will make you pay for them, but I was able to audit a lot of classes for free when I was in community college, and that was super helpful for me. You don't get a grade for it or anything, and it doesn't go on your transcript necessarily, but you are able to sit and learn there. One of my professors was working with me to do that when I was in grad school, or after I graduated grad school, and they don't do that at the university level, at least not over here. They're like, no, you still have to pay for the full tuition and stuff. And I'm like, why the heck would I audit a class if I have to pay for it? Like, I would be paying to get the grades and the paperwork at that point, right? So I would be paying for it but not obtaining it, because it's 2020, y'all. You can take a free class online and call it a day. And those free classes are like from Duke and Stanford and MIT and stuff. So keep that in mind if they're telling you they want you to pay the same amount of money to audit versus actually take the class. At that point, I would really just take the class, to be honest. That's what I would do. You do what you want to do, though. It's your life. And that it means that you are the most important person to consult for that decision in particular. What is it worth to you? But you can take a lot of free classes online. I totally recommend them. And all kinds of stuff. You can learn Mandarin online as well. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. You can do one-on-one classes with somebody for it. Now, when we're talking about straining our brains as well, it's not just lifelong learning. There are also a bunch of other mental activities that help improve our cognitive reserve. That can be anything from playing board games to juggling. Juggling takes a lot of cognitive ability. You're having to literally have a bunch of balls in the air. We use that as a metaphor for, having a lot going on and having your attention focused on everything else that's going on over here. And that's because that's pretty much what juggling is, my friends. So you can start juggling if you want. We're all in a lockdown right now. Go ahead and start juggling socks. Ball up the socks, juggle with those. I think usually people start with scarves, but like the light flowy ones that people used to wear like in the 90s and stuff, they seem more like they're ascots almost than what I think of as a scarf. Now when I think of a scarf, I usually think knit scarves. So maybe not knit scarves, there's a little bit long. You're wanting something that is light and flowy and small so that you can grasp it and it's not going to get tangled with everything else, but also so that it falls to the ground slowly so that you can work on your technique and then the speed will come naturally. After that, you can move up to socks or balls or oranges or whatever you have lying around. To be honest, that's safe. Don't pick up the chainsaws, you guys. Let's not do that one. But you can do a whole lot to work on these types of tasks. So if taking a math class isn't really your thing, maybe board games is more your style, or learning something new like juggling. Think about all the mental activities that you could do as being on a spectrum. Some of them are passive and not very challenging, like laying on the couch watching documentaries, which I also love to do. I'm not sneezing at those, but it's not going to be sufficient for our purposes. It includes that on one end to maybe taking a class online in how to code or do statistics or learn how to speak a new language. All of those are very active, challenging tasks. And taking on those challenges can be difficult, but the benefits are greater too. On the one hand, watching a lot of shark documentaries makes me a lot of fun at parties. But also, on the other hand, it's not very useful in anything else I do in my day-to-day life. I cannot just put on my resume that I know a lot of sick shark facts. That is not going to help me out, really. I mean, not for what I'm doing. If I was a marine biologist, perhaps. But unfortunately, that is not what I do. And so that does not help me that much. Whereas learning these other languages and taking these online workshops and webinars and stuff really do help me out. And then I can just keep adding lines to my resume. Now, granted, I'm type A, so that's really important to me. I do want to stipulate that just because something is challenging for you does not mean it also has to be productive or marketable in any way. If you want to just learn how to paint, do it, even if you aren't planning to monetize it. That is an act of doing something new, and it can also be a source of catharsis. It is for me. I do a lot of abstract painting. I don't know what I'm doing, you guys. I'll just Google some videos and try to learn something about it. But for the most part, it's catharsis. I'm not putting as much effort into really learning anything new in that one, but perhaps that would be something you would like more. So watch some Bob Ross. They stream him 24/7 pretty much on Twitch. You can catch Bob Ross anytime and start learning how to make his paintings. It could be really fun. Or do a paint party with someone where they teach you how to paint. Try something new that is in your comfort zone, even if it's not supposed to be marketable, even if it's not something you're looking to monetize. I think that as much as I love monetizing my hobbies, a lot of times we view things as being frivolous if you're not able to make money at them. And I think that that is a lot of a problem in capitalist society in particular. So go out there and learn to play the guitar poorly. That's what I do. You can also go out there and learn to paint poorly. That's what I do. I even hesitate to call that one learning. It's more for my emotional wellness than my intellectual or cognitive wellness at that point. But I digress. Find something that you think you would like to learn and do it. One day, I just learned how to knit for the heck of it, and then I didn't do it right. I mean, I knitted a 9-foot-long scarf because I thought that you had to finish off the entire skein of yarn. So it looks wild, and no one in their right mind would wear it. Probably. If you want it, call me. Or rather, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram. I will send you a giant scarf, you guys. It took me a long time to make. It's my very first one. But I did it, even though it wasn't entirely correct, and I learned from my mistakes. And then when I made my second scarf, it was a normal size because I knew when to stop and how to fix the mistakes as I went along, how to recognize them, and the importance of counting, at least for me. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about some more ways to strengthen our brains.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about ways that we can strain our brains and how these activities really exist on a continuum of being really passive and only mildly challenged to being active and very challenging. Now, they have this as written as a spectrum or a continuum, but when I say a spectrum, what I really mean, since there are two different types of variables, is it's going to be more like a XY diagram. So you're going to plot them more or less. So it does not have to necessarily be both passive and mildly challenging. It could be passive and very challenging, or it could be active and only mildly challenging. Maybe you're already pretty much a pro at swinging a hammer and you just are volunteering with Habitat for Humanity because you feel like it's important for the social aspect for you, or you just want to do something good as well and challenge yourself in a different way by getting up at 6 a.m. every Saturday to go and build or something like that. Maybe it's just the joy of helping other people that gets you out of bed in the morning. Regardless of the reasoning, something like that might be only mildly challenging for you, but also still active. It's not necessarily active learning, but if, say, you know how to swing a hammer, but you don't know how to lay drywall, you're going to learn today. And that can be really helpful for you. Sometimes I like to go over to my buddy Mike's house because he and his lovely wife Nicole are remodeling their entire home. And I go over and we patch drywall, or we install a toilet, or we rip up all of the floorboards safely and then go through and replace them with brand new flooring. I missed the tiling day. That really bummed me out. That was probably the last free weekend before the lockdown started, and I did not know it was coming. If I had, I would have gone, but alas, that time has passed. They're probably going to get so much done during this coronavirus lockdown. And on the one hand, I'm happy for them, but on the other hand, I'm bummed that I don't get to lay tile. So the more you work at it, the better you get at stuff. So a lot of these things I have done before, but it's also the experience, as we discussed in an earlier segment today. So the experience and the act of learning something new are really what reinforces that and helps you with your cognitive reserve. So as you learn more, it's just like those 5 levels videos where you start out laying tile simply, or you start out doing something simple like painting a bathroom and stuff, and then you learn from your mistakes. And by the time you get to the second bedroom, now you really know how to go ahead and lay that flooring. Now you really know how to appropriately cover a wall with paint and how to prime it when it's necessary to prime it, and so on and so forth. There's a lot that you can learn along the way, and in that way, you are building upon that experience and that cognition that's associated with it in these levels. Just brick by brick is really what you're doing. So I definitely recommend that. But also keep in mind that being challenged sometimes means being uncomfortable. I always tell my friends that growth does not tend to come from a place of comfort. So when they ask me for advice and I give it and they say, "Oh, I don't want to do that though." And I'm like, well, do you maybe think that the fact that you don't want to do it is probably a good reason that you should do it? Because it's more helpful for you, even though it's going to be a hard conversation. It's something that needs to be done. If not talking to the person is the easy path, then this might be a good place for growth. We need to look at it and go, why do I feel this way? And how can I potentially do better? Now, I'm just always on a quest for personal growth and also cognitive growth in particular. That's my hobby, is learning new things. So I'm really into that, and I pretty much am rather confrontational, and I embrace the discomfort. That is something I've learned to do over the years. I used to be very conflict avoidant, and I learned to step into it at a certain point working in business. And it made me a lot more effective at my job. Not all confrontation has to be really difficult or even harrowing. I think a lot of folks are really freaked out by it, or they think it has to be inherently aggressive. But confrontation does not necessitate aggression. You can confront someone about something and have a conversation from a place of respect. You get to decide how that conversation is going to go and how it's framed. So keep that in mind when you are kind of staring into the void of discomfort. There is a stereotype associated with aging that says that young people are really bold explorers and older people tend to be homebodies who don't like to experience new things. Now, on the one hand, sure, there are probably lots of people like that. But on the other hand, I was a really timid homebody as a child, and my grandparents were definitely the bold explorers. They dragged me all over Williamsburg, Virginia, and Jamestown, and Old Salem, and everything while they were wanting to learn these things. They also took me to Busch Gardens one time, but that was, for me. They're like, this is your reward. You went through all of these things. And it helped instill a love of learning in me, and it helped model lifelong learning for me. Didn't necessarily appreciate it at the time, but you guys, it was overall dope. Looking back, I would totally go back to that place. My godson is an old man at heart, so he would probably actually love it even as a kid right now, but I don't think he would enjoy having to walk everywhere, which is pretty much what I hated as a small child, because their legs were twice as long as mine. That's important, you guys. Keep in mind how long your children's legs are. Sometimes they're complaining because they're actually tired. So at this point, though, my point is that there are two different possibilities here as being ends of the spectrum, and there are also a ton of other possibilities between them within that spectrum. You could have older people who just love learning things. One of my favorite students I tutored when I was a tutor in community college was an elderly man who was in his 70s. He was like 72 or 74. And he came in to learn intro to computers. He was retired and the class was free. And so he's like, this is what I want to do. And I'm just taking HVAC stuff too, because then I can fix my own AC, and that class was free, so I might as well. He would fall asleep on me sometimes while I was tutoring him on computers and stuff, but that's okay. You just jiggle his leg and you go, hey, you want to keep going, or you done for the day? And he'd let me know, and then we'd do whichever one he wanted to. I'm like, you can always hit me up later. I pretty much live at the school. So there's a lot to learn from the older generation, and there are definitely older generations out there who can teach us a lot about keeping that love for learning for life. Overall, though, there is kind of this stereotype that over time, people become less confident and learning new things might seem scary or intimidating. And if you have an older person in your life who you've ever bought an iPad or a computer or any type of technology for at any point, you may be very familiar with this. Especially if you're a millennial, we had to teach our parents how to use a lot of technology. Technology was around when they were younger, but if you have older parents, then you may be called a lot in order to fix things wrong with their tablets or their computers or their modem. Now, I did used to be an internet tech, so I'm okay with that, but a lot of folks are not, and that's okay. Just let them know there are services out there to help them. You will get them the number of the Apple Store and let them go to the Apple Store and take those classes to teach them how to do things if you don't know that much about it. But overall, people seem to think that as they get older, learning is harder and it takes longer than it used to. So it's just easier to keep doing what you know. But getting out of your comfort zone really challenges your mental skills. That can be anything like traveling to a city you've never been to before. That makes you navigate in unfamiliar surroundings. It can still be within the country that you live in. It doesn't have to be somewhere that has a foreign language, although if you are privileged enough to go and do that, that would be amazing, and I would highly recommend that. Just traveling as much as you possibly can helps you learn so much. And it's a lot of cognitive skills that we don't tend to think about. It's also about allowing yourself to be open to the world and not making your world any smaller than it has to be. So it's going to expand your worldview and give you a better sociocultural understanding of the entire world around you instead of just your small ecosystem that you're in. All right, we're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about being social.
GSMC GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Before the break, we were talking about how traveling can expand your worldview and how there are tons of different types of people who do continue to grow as they get older. Now we're also going to talk about how being social can help. Not even just traveling to a new city, but also interacting with other people can really broaden our minds and sharpen them as well. So when we're in our comfort zones or echo chambers, then we really aren't seeing many unfamiliar people or circumstances. And I know, a lot of you are going to be like, Alex, but that's the point. I like what I like. And I get that, but we also want to make sure that you're not in a rut. You don't have to go out and see unfamiliar people all the time, but every now and then is really good for you. That social isolation of being in your comfort zone can really put people at risk for mental decline, especially people who are aging. And by aging, I mean everyone, but particularly people who are on the upper end of that spectrum. So by isolating yourself, both socially and mentally, it can really deplete your cognitive reserve. And if you're not using those neural networks, scientists say that they'll just go away. So another antidote for this is, again, seek a volunteer position that's a really good fit with your skills and abilities. Once you quit your job and retire finally, you can still volunteer. And that way you are able to do it like once a week or once every 2 weeks. A lot of companies are very understanding about what you're able to commit. Now, some do need a certain amount of hours, but others are also down to just accept as much help as you are willing to give them because they recognize that it is free. So after you are done working, you can go ahead and try to volunteer if that's something you want to do. Find something that has a good fit for your skills and abilities. So like we talked about earlier, if you already know how to swing a hammer, go ahead and volunteer with something like Habitat for Humanity, or volunteer to patch up things in your elderly neighbors' houses and stuff. You can also go ahead and have contact with a variety of people in that context, and that can put you into a lot of new settings and situations that your brain will really thank you for because it's going to help it puzzle out the world around it. Another point I would like to discuss today is that science says not to necessarily buy into taking brain health supplements. A lot of these drugs, or these supplements, they're not technically drugs, according to the FDA. A lot of these supplements are said to improve brain health, especially promising enhanced memory and better attention and focus, but a lot of them do not work. A recent survey saw that 25% of adults over the age of 50 take supplements for their brain health. But there's actually no solid proof that any of these work. The number one issue with these over-the-counter supplements is that they're not regulated at all. So since they are just supplements, the FDA doesn't oversee any product testing or ingredient accuracy. They just look to see if the supplements are making health claims related to the treatment of specific diseases. So for example, this past week, someone who sells CBD oil, a company, claimed that their CBD oil could fight coronavirus. That is a very dangerous and misleading claim. There's not any research to back that up or anything like that. And so the FDA had to reach out and go, hey, you can't say that. You're saying that that can treat a specific disease. That is not okay at all. And so that's really what they cracked down on supplements for. However, if you're saying that it can help with your brain, that is not technically against the rules because it's not for a specific disease. So manufacturers of supplements can claim a product helps with all kinds of stuff. They can say things like mental alertness or memory loss. They just can't say that it does anything, whether protecting against, preventing, or improving the outcomes of specific diseases like dementia or Alzheimer's. But really, it's just very careful marketing and semantics. They are just making sure they don't have to back up any claims that their product is effective or safe. They don't have to do anything at all in that regard. That's because they're not regulated. So a lot of these pills, if you actually look at the ingredients, remember we're really big on reading those labels here. A lot of those focus on omega-3 fatty acids, like the kind you get in fish oil, as well as vitamin E, vitamin B vitamins, so there's a whole slew of those, and various combinations. So there is some strong evidence that diets like the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet, two of which we have discussed in previous episodes, and the MIND diet can help improve your cognitive function. And a lot of those are really heavy in those oils. I don't want to say heavy per se, but there's a lot of really beneficial nutrients in the oils, nuts, and seeds that are common in diets like the Mediterranean diet. And they're healthy oils and everything as well. Those diets also have foods that have a ton of vitamins and minerals in them, but they're not even sure if it's the combination of the nutrients in those diets that's what's truly beneficial for people, or if it's specific ones, or certain amounts in certain combination, or even other factors that are totally unknown. So researchers have been testing how these individual nutrients affect cognitive health, and so far the studies they have performed, although relatively few, have not found any evidence they help for the most part. There are a few exceptions. Now, the doctors do say that this still doesn't mean that the brain supplements may not work. It's just that there's not much evidence from randomized clinical trials, if there even is any evidence, that any type of isolated vitamins or minerals truly promote more brain health. So, what has science found so far? Let's get to the part where we get to know these vitamins and minerals. We discuss these vitamins and minerals in more depth in our vitamin episode and our mineral episode, but the TLDR in the context of your cognitive health is that a 2014 study in the journal Nutrients did a metadata study, so a review of all of the existing research on vitamin E and various health issues, and that included heart disease, stroke, and Alzheimer's. It was a very wide body of work that they were looking at. But they did find that high doses of vitamin E may help people who have mild to moderate Alzheimer's dementia to continue to perform their daily life functions for a limited duration. However, vitamin E did not prevent the disease or reduce any other symptoms, and the high doses did also increase the risk of having a hemorrhagic stroke. So be mindful of that. B vitamins are often linked with brain health, especially B6, B9, which we usually call folate or folic acid, depending on whether it's in the body, folate, or in supplement form, folic acid. So they can help break down homocysteine. High levels of homocysteine have been correlated with a greater risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. Those B vitamins also help you produce the energy that you need to develop new brain cells. However, most people get enough of that through their diet. And in general, as we tend to say here in this podcast, if you are able to get your nutrients from your diet, you should. Remember that some of these are water soluble versus fat soluble. There are a lot of implications for them. You need to make sure you're eating or drinking with them, etc. if you're taking them in supplement form. It is much better for you to just go, what are these foods that have these in them? Okay, cool. I'm going to eat more of these foods. One of the most common supplements that I've seen used over the years is ginkgo biloba. So these are fan-shaped leaves of the ginkgo tree, and they're used in traditional Chinese medicine to treat all kinds of stuff. In the US, we tend to sell it as extract from the leaves, and it's in a supplement commonly referred to as ginkgo biloba. It says that it's a memory enhancer, but the science doesn't really support those claims. There was a very large clinical trial that explored the possible correlation between ginkgo biloba and brain health, and the researchers recruited more than 3,000 older adults. That's a wonderful sample size, you guys. Remember, we're wanting 30 or more, so 3,000 is outstanding. Like 140 is really good, but 3,000 is quite nice. So that helps us with the law of averages. And the average age of these people was 79. 54% were men, and they had normal cognitive function or mild cognitive impairment. Everyone was given about 120 milligrams of ginkgo or a placebo twice a day for almost 6 years. And they selected that specific amount based on some previous research as well. So there's a whole body of work in this area. And then the results found that ginkgo did not lower the overall rate of developing dementia. And that's okay, as long as we're honest about it and we aren't just tricking people into taking these supplements that clinically do not work. So most supplements that are sold aren't really tested rigorously in clinical trials. If they are tested in clinical trials, it's very minimal. So ginkgo has been tested very thoroughly over the years in studies like this because scientists do want to go ahead and treat and cure Alzheimer's research. The scientists are not the same as big pharma per se. A lot of them are actual doctors performing these clinical research trials, trying to solve problems in the world around them. If we were able to solve Alzheimer's and just eradicate Alzheimer's and dementia with something like ginkgo, these scientists would be all over it. Would pharma maybe try to suppress it? Or alternatively, beat it to market so that no one else could sell it and patent everything? Then yeah, I think they would definitely do that. They're not all that great, you guys. So don't get me wrong. Even though I'm saying that these supplements are not working, I'm not a fan of big pharma either. But what I am saying is that a lot of scientists and doctors are out there performing this research to try to save people. And even though it's something that they wish would be true, it turns out that it's not true. And so we have to think about that too. These are people who've dedicated their lives to trying to alleviate some of the stress as well as the suffering that people who have Alzheimer's and dementia go through. They would pretty much likely give anything in order to solve this, but they're not going to stand there and lie in your face because they want to solve it. They don't want to just feel better about it. So ginkgo has been tested thoroughly, and there is strong evidence that it does not, in fact, prevent memory decline or dementia. So if you're taking it for a different purpose, that's one thing. But if you're taking it for memory, doctors suggest that you don't take it for that purpose. Take a different one instead. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. If you could add us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.